These past couple of weeks, we've had heavier snowfall than we've had in the past couple of years. This has brought the snowmobilers out in the late afternoon, and we can see the tracks they left in the morning. And other than one incident, they stick to the trail we made on the outskirt of property for them to cut through. Animals have been leaving their tracks as well. We can see where a squirrel has chewed some of the cambium layer off this maple twig, and the squirrel scat indicates it's been eating buckthorn berries. And here's the remnants of a meal of a hawk, probably one of the accipiters that's been hanging around the property. And there's been a mink hunting around the beaver pond lately. We've been fortunate enough to get a couple quick glances at the mink. While feeding beavers, we also feed the birds around the beaver pond. And we also see a shrew coming out for bird seed. Here it is again, in slow motion. And we had our first ever known golden eagle pass through the sanctuary. It's a young one, and seems to be traveling with a bald eagle. Matt has known about this for some time, but Natalie and I first discovered this week this fungus. It's known as cedar apple rust. This cedar apple rust fungus has a unique lifestyle. It does parasitize the trees, but it requires a host of 2 different species. It spends part of its life on the cedar trees, and then in the spring, when the apple trees bloom, it moves over to them. Since it cannot survive without both hosts, apple farmers often clear out the red cedars around their apple orchards. The highlights lately have been the abundance of insects. Stoneflies seem to be one of the most common, especially of the family Capneidae. This is one of the 2 families of stoneflies that are active during the winter. All of the literature I've read, and intuition, says that they should be out searching for mates right now. It looks, however, as if they're wandering around aimlessly. I've even scooped them up and put them next to each other, and they seem to not even notice. They walk right on by one another, going about their business. The other interesting thing about these guys is that we see them far from the water in many circumstances, often hundreds of yards. It doesn't make much sense, since they emerge from the water and then lay their eggs in the water after mating. I have seen a few climb under the ledge of the ice, and maybe this is where the mating takes place. The family of Capniidae is most easily distinguished from other winter active insects by the long cerci coming out the back end. The nymphs of stoneflies can be seen in the detritus of the creek if you dig around enough. They are wingless and have significantly more girth, but they look markedly similar to the adults. This is the only representative I found of the other winter active family of stoneflies, Taeniopterigidae. Midge flies have also been here in abundance. Midge flies are a family of insects that we normally think of as swarming around lakes in the summer months. This time of year, however, they don't tend to swarm so much unless it gets really unusually warm. Midge flies somewhat resemble mosquitoes, but these don't bite. And midges have a characteristic gait. Notice their elongated forelimbs, which they use almost as feelers or antennae. I think I have seen at least a few different species. And thus far, all I've shown are females. Males have these obvious feathery antennae. These feathery antennae probably help them sense the vibrational communication of females. The midges don't seem to wander quite as aimlessly as the stoneflies. Many were coming to this dead buckthorn tree on the side of the creek, and they all seemed to climb up the twigs to the highest point possible. Once there, they could wait patiently for hours. I never did see any two climb the same twig, though. It seemed like if one was occupied, the other would pass on by. Time after time, I saw males climbing around on twigs, as if in search of something, perhaps in pursuit of a female. I also witnessed females in the vicinity of males. However, I have yet to see any interaction between any two individuals. I did find one with an injured wing, which could have been from fighting, but I think it more likely to be from an unfortunate accident. We noticed more spiders around the sanctuary than usual for this time of year. And interestingly, none where the midges or stoneflies were. This suggests that there's more insects and prey items for these spiders around the sanctuary that we're not seeing. They may be hiding in tunnels beneath the thick layer of snow. When I had disturbed this one too much, it curled up into a ball and played dead. But after a minute or so, it returned to its activity. Off the sanctuary, Matt's been working to get a falcon nest box put up in Oswego. I went up there on a day off to see if I could find the falcons. I didn't see them, but I did see loads of waterfowl. Oswego's located on Lake Ontario. The waterfowl seem to congregate back in the harbor, where they're protected from the wind and the waves outside. The majority of what I was seeing were common mergansers and long-tailed ducks. Both of these species dive to the bottom of the lake to forage for shellfish. Having such an abundance of these ducks suggests an abundance of food. My guess is that it's mostly mussels, clams, and snails. When these birds weren't feeding, they seemed to spend a lot of time preening. Keeping healthy feathers must be important in these cold waters. There were also loads of gulls up there. Most were ring-billed, but there were some herrings and a few immature greater black-backed gulls. Meanwhile, back at home, the Utica marsh is also teeming with activity. There's a lot of songbirds feeding on the sumac seeds. Bluebirds and chickadees and white-throated sparrows. Throughout most of the year, there's a lot of human traffic here too, but not in the winter. I think people are trying to avoid the cold weather, but in doing so, they miss a lot of great activity. The white-throated sparrows also seem to have no problem finding insects in the crevices of tree bark. There's also evidence that raptors have been hunting, such as this cached rabbit. The gash in the back of this rabbit's neck and the lack of predator tracks around is a telltale sign that a raptor was the culprit. And while out here, we were lucky enough to see this possum wandering around. Perhaps it was roosed from its den, or maybe it was just hungry on this relatively warm Valentine's Day. Possums are typically nocturnal, but it's not all that unusual, especially in the winter time, to see them out during the day. It showed no signs of disease, which may include confusion or aggression, and it quickly found a hiding place, at least by possum standards. And the tracks that they leave are pretty obviously possum, from the way they waddle and drag their tail. After we had left and returned about a half hour later, the possum was gone. We saw the tracks leaving its hiding place. In South Utica, in a park off of Burstone Road, just west of the arterial, a roost of crows can be found. I estimate the murder to be about 10,000 deep. Since I first discovered the roost, they stayed for about a week and a half and then must have moved elsewhere. Although they are extremely raucous in the morning, at night they are completely silent. I've not been to the roost past 10 p.m., but at that time, the crows are still filtering in silently. The earliest I've been there is 5 a.m., and that's about an hour before twilight and an hour and a half before sunrise, but they are making noise at this time. Unfortunately, my camera does not work well in low light conditions, so I cannot film the activity in the darkest of hours. It is believed that they prefer to roost in cities because it is relatively open and bright, so they are somewhat protected from predators sneaking up on them, particularly owls. Throughout the morning, they disperse in a steady stream. However, there are occasional bursts of large numbers of crows leaving their perches. After a burst, many of the crows continue on, but a good portion of them return back to their perches. And within about an hour after sunrise, only a small handful of crows remain. One curious aspect of the roost is that I would expect the grounds below them to be covered in whitewash. I noticed very little scat, and this I'm not even convinced was from the crows. And that wraps up these past couple of weeks.